Joining us is Justin Jackson, and today we're going to demonstrate how to start a bonsai. And there's a few different methods from what I understand.
Sure, one way is the simplest and most tried and true is just start with a seed and let it grow, which is what I've done with this African baobab tree. Planted it as a seed a couple of years ago and have gradually been growing it up. And of course it doesn't look much like a bonsai tree yet, but it'll get there after the next couple of years. That's the slowest way to do it. There's a lot more expeditious ways to do it though.
And this is one of those where you started with a much bigger plant, right?
This was actually, I bought this for 20 bucks. It was in a 20-gallon pot, and it was usually, I think it was $89, but they'd marked it down so much because it was towards the end of the year at a big box hardware store, and it didn't look very happy at all. But I cut it off nice and low, and it was just a stump for a while that gradually put out some branches, and I wired it around there.
Yeah, so you can see here where you cut, and you cut it at an angle.
Right, I cut this at an angle. One of the things that you want to try to have with your tree is what they call taper, where your trunk is nice and fat, and it's kind of a gradual taper towards the top. You don't want just a fat stump and then all of a sudden tiny little branches. And so to try to get that effect, I've cut this at a slant so that when it heals over and all that scar tissue fills it up, it'll hopefully be a little more tapered.
And so that people don't aren't afraid to do it themselves. When you cut it, there was nothing but a stump left,
nothing
right?
but a stump.
This all grew afterward.
Right.
Okay.
And the elm trees, by the way, I want to point out, the elm trees are especially great at that. Some trees, if you cut them off, then sometimes they don't come back, but elm trees pretty much always will.
Yeah, you have to do your research. Well, today we're going to show more of the instant gratification method. These take a bit longer.
Sure. This is a juniper, just a 2-gallon pot of juniper that you'd typically get at any garden center. And one of the things that you want to look for when you're trying to select your specimen that you're going to work on is you want to find something that's got a nice single trunk in there, preferably. And then if there's a way to look and see, it's also good to try to look and see what some of the root structure looks like up close to the tree.
Okay.
And then also the branching, to kind of think about, what is this thing going to look like when I'm done, which it's hard to even imagine what it's going to look like at this point. But
this one has a lot of branches that seem to kind of come up and then spill over, so that might be something to look for.
Right, I think we could turn this into a decent looking little tree.
Okay, how do we get started?
So the first thing that I would do, once I got it home, is take a razor blade and cut off about the top, third or quarter of the pot here, and get that off of there and scrape away some of the dirt, and so I can have a look at the trunk and the roots and see what we've got to work with. So as soon as we get the top third of the pot off, or the fourth of the pot, whatever, out of the way, then we'll take a root rake and we'll start raking away the top of the soil and the debris that's up there. A lot of times it's going to be full of needles or leaves, depending on the species of the tree. And try to work that away so that we can see what this trunk looks like, and hopefully get an idea of the way that the roots are spreading out, and have a look at that also.
And you're working on a turntable, which I could tell makes this a lot easier.
Definitely.
So it might be something you could just make. This is a homemade one, so
sure,
it makes it easier.
They've got the real life ones that you can buy them and spend $100 on, or you can just do what I did and cobble something together that works.
So what's our next step?
So next I'm gonna get up under here and try to start thinning some of this out so we can get a better view of the trunk and sort of the lower branch structure of it.
Okay, and what tool are you going to use for that?
For that I'll use, they have numerous sizes of scissors that you can use, all the way from tiny ones to big ones. I'm going to use these longer ones because I can reach farther up in there without having to stick my hand up in all those needles.
Okay.
And on the underside, I'm intentionally taking some of the limbs off the underside of this, because on your big limbs you don't want a bunch of growth going down below it. So as I'm going along, I want to try to maintain an alternating branch pattern as I go through here and trim some of this out. And I want to think about, where's the end of this branch going to end up when I'm done with it. So for example, we know this is going to be probably too long out here, so I'm going to bring this down a ways and at least get it closer to where we're going to end up.
And do we want to thin out some of this interior growth?
Right, we'll continue the pattern that we did down here, where we're removing some of the needles off of the branch itself. So in here we'll take out some of these needles so that this looks like an actual branch and not just something with needles growing out of it.
Okay, we want to see that structure and celebrate the bark and the growth. Okay. Justin, this is a really amazing transformation. I think you've taken about 75% of the foliage off,
Yeah,
maybe,
I think so.
give or take a little. As you were doing this, were you thinking about a front and back to the plant or anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that you want to look for on your plan is try to identify what's going to be the front view that's typically going to face the viewer. And one thing to look for is whenever on your front view you want it to have the tree so that the lower limbs go out to the side and not straight towards the viewer or the back. And it's best to have the top of the tree lean out towards the viewer. The Japanese like to think of it as bowing to the viewer.
Okay, and this tree, as you revealed the branch, it naturally had that, making that be the front.
Right.
Okay. So what's the next step? I feel like we're getting close.
We're getting close. We're going to keep trimming on it a little bit as we go, but now we're going to start the wiring process where we wire these limbs and put them into a better shape.
Okay, and what's the material that you use?
Annealed copper is the best material. I've got some right here. It's copper that they heat up to a certain temperature and then let it cool off. And then also another wire that a lot of people use is this aluminum wire. It's actually aluminum, but it's painted to look like copper.
Okay, and that's going to be a little cheaper because right now copper prices are pretty high.
Right, and then the other thing with this aluminum wire is it's quite a bit softer even than the annealed copper. So one of the things that you want to try to do when you're wiring a branch is you want to use wire that's about a third of the diameter of the limb that you're trying to wire.
Okay, well let's see you work your magic on this one.
Alrighty. And the general shape of the limb, I'm pretty happy with it. You know, I'm kind of a more laid-back guy in the shape of the tree. I tend to let the tree do most of the shaping, and then I just kind of refine it a little bit, whereas a lot of people would put big wire on this and force it to go a certain way. I'm more apt to let it kind of grow the way it wants to and then encourage it to do different things. So what I'll do on this one now is probably on some of these smaller ones is get some small wire on here and twist this around so that these are spread out more.
But Justin, after you finished wiring, you went ahead and potted this up pretty quick for us. And when you did that, you took off a significant portion of the roots.
Right. We took a lot of the top of this tree off, probably 70 or 80%, I would say, of the green on it. So we're able to take away a lot of the roots then, because you don't need near as much roots to support that.
If you left too much on, might it put too much growth into the top?
It would grow really well, but at the same time, the goal is to get it into a bonsai pot at some point. And so it's nice to go ahead and make that change now while we're able to.
Okay. And of course, a bonsai is never finished. This will require some ongoing training.
We've intentionally left some of the limbs on here long and scraggly because we want them to grow out quite a bit before we cut them back again to give them some thickness to them.
All right. Well, I look forward to seeing it grow and evolve. Thank you so much, Justin.
Thank you.